good evening. My name is Jennifer Hurl, and I'm the archivist here, which all of you know, don't you? We are recording this for use on the library's YouTube channel. So if anyone here happens to be uncomfortable speaking on recording, maybe wait to share your memories till after we stop the recording at the end. But we really encourage you to do just that throughout. This is kind of an interactive type program. So as I go through, I'll kind of take little pauses, and everyone here, I'm sure, I know you all have memories of the library. So feel free to share them as we go along, or if there are a lot of nice old pictures throughout my presentation. So, if you see people feel free to point them out. I have some of them identified, but not all. And some of the pictures have a lot of people in, so obviously we're not going to take the time to identify them all. But do feel free to interject your own memories and any information you might have as we move along. So, my presentation is on the history of the library, and it's been well over 8 decades since we were organized. And we'll start at the very beginning. How many of you remember we're young enough, we don't, Patty. How many of you remember the very first library?
Wasn't it down the vacant lot of the old Lucent Grocery?
No, that was the second. That was the second library.
Across from Amity?
Yeah. These are we don't have many pictures at all from the first library, but these are two of them, and we have a good dozen or so scrapbooks over here that people have kept over time, documenting the library's history. So when we're finished, if you want to look through any of those, or come back sometime if you're interested, there's a lot of good information and a lot of neat photographs in those scrapbooks. Our first library was tucked away in an upstairs room of the Meyersdale Republican building, which, as Britta pointed out, was in the lot that's now the parking lot across from Zion and Amity churches. And as I mentioned, we only have a few pictures from up there. These are two young ladies coming down the steps, and at that point in time it was known as the Meyersdale Free Library. I don't have any clue who those girls are, and probably none of us do. These are the oldest of the pictures I'll be sharing, since they're from the beginning of the library's history. So, how do we go from that home to this, our library today, here in the middle, right in the middle of the town, and actually just a short stroll down the street from that first Meyersdale Republican building. It all really began with the Meyersdale Women's Club. Leave it up to the ladies to get things done. Ken and Perry, it's all right. But Perry will come along later here in the presentation. The Meyersdale Women's Club formed in 1938, and in their very first year, they began discussing plans for a library. This is an editorial that appeared in the Meyersdale Republican on the 1st of May, 1969. Frances had just passed away, and this was an editorial written about her. About 4 paragraphs down there, they note the Free Library was established in the second floor of the Meyersdale Republican building, and from a meager beginning there, it outgrew its quarters and was finally located in the Lucente building, as you mentioned, Perry. Now Meyersdale has one of the finest libraries that can be found in any small community. And further on in the editorial, as they're talking about Frances, they note she saw a need for a library here and went on to do something about it. She was the president of that first the Women's Club when they established themselves. And she was the daughter of William Livingood, who was a publisher of the Republican, and Frances worked not only with him on the newspaper staff, but also in later years Herman Bayshore. So we do have a number of photographs that were donated at some point in time by her family, and some of them are in one of our Power Library collections. And this is one of those photographs of Frances when she was younger. So, as I mentioned, in 1938, the Women's Club was formed, and you can see a few newspaper articles there, one from the Johnstown Tribune Democrat, and another one from the Meyersdale Republican, both dated 1938, about their plans to form a library. It's probably, you all can't read the top of that, but this is from one of the scrapbooks over here, and it gives a little bit of a background on the first library. It notes that in its first year of existence, the Meyersdale Women's Club undertook to give Meyersdale a community library. The best room that could be afforded was a second-floor large room over a printing shop. The Women's Club was the Library Association and named club members to the board of directors, or trustees. In the beginning, the Borough Council paid the minimum rent. Furniture and book collection was acquired through donations. A nest egg bank account from a former women's organization, the Civic League, was used to build bookshelves. Volunteers, club women, and other women and girls of the community conducted the library. So, our library really dates back to 1938, when they first began planning. And on May 16th of the next year, 1939, the Meyersdale Free Library opened 8 hours per week with donated books and items. And Terry will probably find some of these statistics interesting. How many hours per week do we need to be open now to get state funding?
52.
Okay, so we've come, not only have we come a long way really in the buildings we've moved from one to the other, but it's interesting. I found it very interesting as I put this together just to see, the differences in funding and of course you're going over 80 some years, so you're going to see differences, but even pay attention throughout the differences. You really do when you really look into some of these pictures, some of the advancements just in technology over that time. But all volunteer, 8 hours per week, donated books and items. So next Tuesday, I think, is the 16th, we will officially celebrate our 84th birthday here. So we're really not that far from 100 years. I think we'll make it. But 1940, the Board of Trustees is elected, and Frances is elected president until her death in 1969. So clearly she was pretty dedicated. She spent almost 30 years as president of the library's board. In 1962, that was the year the library first applied for state aid. And to get that aid, they were required to pay staff 20 weekly hours, and Frances Collins and Marguerite Cockley were then hired as librarians. The next year, in June of '63, we were incorporated as the Meyersdale Public Library, and at that time, the Johnstown District Center began to provide us with interlibrary loan service. I had no clue that interlibrary loan went back that far. That kind of surprised me. They provided more books, magazines, professional help, and a telephone. So, from 1939 to '63, the library didn't even have a telephone. Which again, when you think in today's terms of, imagine, Patty, like no telephone. The telephone never rings out front. It's hard to imagine. And then in 1964, through a venture in faith, $3,500 in local funds was raised to secure $2,250 in state aid, and our service in that year extended to Summit Township. So I guess prior to 1964, we primarily just served Meyersdale Borough. And then after what would it be, 39, 49, 59, about 55 or 25 years, in August of 1964, the decision was made to move. So now we see Frances. I get the impression she was a pretty good fundraiser, just from looking through some of her old letters. This is one that she sent out. They must have completed their annual fundraising campaign in September back in those days, because some of these letters are dated September. But this one is from September 1st of 1964. It's signed, "Sincerely yours," by Frances Simler, the trustees president, and Louise Campbell, their treasurer. And I just pulled out some of Frances's quotes throughout. Now keep in mind they're planning a move. They want to move, and she says, "Now the crying need is more space. We have outgrown our upstairs room." And you'll see this theme repeating itself throughout the history of our library. More space is needed. Is this a big undertaking? Well, we believe it can be done. The library in convenient and inadequate quarters will be a credit to the community and of service to all people of the borough and surrounding area. Will you give support to this worthy cause? And this was a page out of one of the scrapbooks. It's actually an entire page. The "We Moved the Library" is at the top with a little sketch at the bottom, but I broke it up to better fit on here. I just kind of thought it was cute. In December of 1964, they began remodeling down the street here, and that's the location, Perry, you were thinking of, right between Duncas's and Roxy's. The building is no longer, but it didn't have, the sketch is just on a scrapbook page by itself. I have no idea who did the sketch, but the more I looked at it, the more I really thought it was cute. You know, how they're depicting the physical move of a building. But I thought, those people, when I first glanced at it, I found it a little odd. But then I gave it some more thought, and I'm like, well, I think they're trying to say everyone's pulling together. You know, you have all these people, you know, and those two girls or fellas there at the end, they're really giving it their all. But I thought it was cute. So they begin remodeling in December of '64, and 4 months later, the building is ready for the library. It was the old Lucente building. Does anyone remember when there was a store in there? Yeah, the building wasn't, in looking through the scrapbooks, there's a picture of the building. I didn't see any pictures of it as it was being torn down, but there's one once it's torn down and the empty lot with some rubble in it, and that was dated around 1980. I was born in '72. I don't remember the building at all, but you can see it standing there right beside what's today Roxy's. So, moving day is in April of 1965. I shared some of these photographs, the one in the middle in particular, the other day on the library's Facebook page, and a lot of people really liked it. And actually, we got some identification on those boys. I don't have it in front of me, and I don't remember them off the top of my head. But everyone kind of took part to move the library from the Republican office up there on the corner of North and Center down the street here. The township supervisors and the borough council provided trucks and hands to move items. The high school boys moved boxes of books by family automobile, and then they even recruited the elementary kids to carry the juvenile books. And finally, the chief of police and the council president and borough employees helped unpack the furniture. And there are some photos of the adults, the borough workers, and one even includes the chief of police in the scrapbooks when they moved in April of '65. So here's Frances's letter, again signed by her and Louise Campbell, the treasurer. This is the next September, September of 1965. She says, a dream has been realized. Meyersdale Public Library is in its new home. With the new quarters come new responsibilities. It is amazing how circulation of books has increased, how many new borrows have come. There is need to increase the library hours and to employ another librarian. And you can see, well, you probably can't read it, but they have the math there at the bottom, and she's outlining the local funds that are needed to qualify for the next state aid appropriation. They're requesting $2,623.29 from Meyersdale Borough and another $1,368.77 from Summit Township for a grand total of $3,992.06. So I guess that's what they needed to qualify for state funding in 1965. And these are just some neat old cute photographs from their time at 110 Center Street. There are a lot of, some of the best pictures documenting the library's history come from the time they spent in that building. I just think the building's really cute. And it was kind of a cute period in time, but the way the kids were all at the library with their books. And you can see up there in the top left corner, that's one of the local Brownie troops. I don't know how many of you ever were maybe Brownies or remember Brownie uniforms. I think I have one of them somewhere tucked away. No, anyone recognize anyone in the pictures? No one looks familiar. And here are some of the ladies who were leaders of the library at that time, and as we know, continued to be leaders for some time. The picture in the top left corner, of course, we have Marguerite Cockley, and then the three ladies in the bottom photo from left to right are Frances Collins, Mary Bright, and Jeannie Whitford. And in the bottom, or in the top right, is Libby. Libby in her younger days. That's a great, that's the one we have over in Libby's corner, isn't it? Yeah, that's a great picture of Libby. And you can see the Meyersdale Public Library sign up on the window. And another neat picture, I guess Leah Collins was maybe the kindergarten teacher? Okay, yeah. She's taken her class to the library in 1967. And if you look into the background of this picture, you can see when the church stood down by what is now Sheets, and when you look really closely, you can see the old gas station that was where Sheets is now. So at this point, we're up to, well, the picture's from 67, but I sketched out a little bit of a timeline. Frances Simler passes away in 69, and then in 1970, Dr. Stratton is elected board president. Their budget at that point in time in 1970 is $7,966, and over 2,300 patrons have library cards. Their total number of books at the library at that point is 9,101. 5 years later, in 75, Esther Bayshore is elected board president, and the library's growth and progress continue.
How many patrons do you have now that have library cards?
Terry, do you know?
It's on my last annual report, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. We'll let Patty know. Patty will report back.
Report back.
Yeah,
Okay.
within the week. This picture has my head full of ideas for maybe a future Maple Festival parade. It wouldn't be that hard to do, probably. This is the Meyersdale Centennial Parade in 1974. Whose truck it is and who's in the truck, I don't know. If I remember correctly, I don't think the photo was identified. But they've taken that. I guess it was maybe a Bronco. I don't know. Perry, do you know?
Oh, that's a station wagon.
Yeah. And they've got, I would assume it's just book covers taped or put on with maybe magnets. all over the book, or all over the vehicle. Stay young with books, it says on the rear windows. They have a big model of a book there strapped to the top. Cute way to participate in the parade, I think. So, in 1978, the library's on the move again. And this is when I start to remember the library. In its larger quarters in the Community Borough Building. Of course, it didn't take up the whole building. From what I remember kind of going in and going around to the right, maybe, toward the library. And Britta's maybe not so much. I don't.
We came in '83.
Okay.
I just remember going straight in myself.
Okay.
That's what it was, I think, because I
Straight
think
in.
it was in Pauline Polifrone's classroom.
Okay, maybe I went straight in and then to the right for story hour, or maybe my brain's just jumbled. So by this point in time, the library hits its highest circulation ever, over 28,400 books and other items. And that's actually comparable to what we are today, right?
That's actually higher
Is it? I thought.
for annual for circulation. That's about our total collection is closer
Okay.
to 29,000.
Okay.
But our circulation isn't that high.
Okay. And that's a scene from inside the library at that point. I noticed, I don't know if Carolyn, something in that picture should look familiar to Carolyn, especially. I spy the clock. The clock there by the arch. That's the clock that's in the Pennsylvania room. You don't see it as much as I do, because your side of the desk faces
She wants to go home early.
away from the faces. No, more often periods I look at the clock and I think, oh shoot, it's 4 or 5 o'clock and there's still
Is that the funny clock by the door?
yeah with the long
Yeah.
handle at the top.
It's still around.
Yep, it's still around.
No,
And
I-
you notice the other thing that you don't see in the library anymore are the albums, the record albums.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So you could go to the library and get a vinyl record, which for that point in time made sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and there's Marguerite in the library's third home. They've noted that there is expanded children's programming, over 800 new books and magazines, and the addition of a copying machine. Another thing that it's very hard, you spend a lot of time out front making copies. Yeah, when I venture out front, a lot of times the staff out front are busy making copies. It's hard to imagine not having a copying machine. And as a matter of fact, we've been fortunate, most of you might already know, but the Community Foundation for the Alleghenies has awarded us a grant to purchase a new copying machine that will allow us to expand our Got News newsletter and help out with some other things. So we'll be looking at getting that before too long. And I just thought these were cute photographs, Christmas time at the library in the early 1980s. The bottom photo there, the kids are making paper chains. We probably all remember making paper chains, right? We're all old enough for that. As a matter of fact, Martin and I have talked about, like, we should decorate with paper chains one of these years. And then you have on the top, you have Marguerite, there's Esther Bayshore, there's Libby. I'm not sure who all the other ladies.
Mabel Slagel's on the left.
The far left
Far
there,
left is Mabel Sable.
in the kind of orange dress.
Yes.
She was a teacher, right?
English.
Okay. Does anyone know there would be 4 other ladies there that
Is one of them Libby?
She said
Libby's
she's third from the left.
yeah, kind of, yeah.
Big hair.
Yeah, Libby probably has I don't know, the blonde girl.
Who is the blonde on the end here? She looks familiar.
I don't know.
She looks like the Lepley, Sandy Lepley.
Yes,
but-
she does,
She
doesn't
does
she?
look like the.
You know, Betty and I were talking about that earlier, but it's definitely not
No.
Sandy.
Oh, okay.
But she does resemble her.
And the next one's the Collins lady.
Yes,
I think it might be, yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Is that whenever they started doing
no,
like
The
our
other.
Christmas
Francis.
luncheons?
Francis.
I have no idea. I have no idea, but it,
Almost looks like you're sitting,
Well-
at least from here, it looks like food at the table there.
yeah. And the picture was, now that you said it, was labeled Christmas luncheon at the library, but whether that's like when they actually first started it, I don't know. And here are some other photographs from that point in the library's history.
That was a lot of kids.
It was a lot of kids. My brother's in that photograph. I spotted him. He's the blondest kid in the bunch there, kind of right in the middle near the shelves in the back. By that point in time, I was probably in school. And some of us know fairly well is in the bottom picture, the bottom right, sitting there telling the kids the stories. That's Linda McDonough. Yeah, during
The far right
In the
picture.
grass.
in the yellow shirt with the kind of greenish, maybe you'd say, print skirt. A much younger Linda McDonough. Much younger. I sent her that picture. I said, a blast from the past, and she's like, indeed, a blast from the past. I don't know who the young man is, and he's not really a kid, I guess you'd say, probably a teenager, over there in the other corner. I just found it interesting because, again, that's how often, a young person with a newspaper, really anyone with a print newspaper, those are unfortunately becoming a thing of the past too. But there he is reading the newspaper. And all of these photos are in our scrapbooks, so if anyone ever wants to come in and look at them, they're all here. You're more than welcome to do so. It does kind of become all the more interesting when you start to think, oh, is there someone I know in that picture? So, in '78, the library had moved down the street here to what we now know as D&D Apartments. And then in '84, encouraged by community support, the decision was made to build a permanent home now for the library. And a building fund goal of $150,000 was set. Herman E. Bayshore was appointed the chair, the fund drive chair, and ground was broken on September 1st. And this is where, Perry, I'm sure you can share some memories. And the original sketch of the library is pretty close to what it actually became. There were a few less windows on the front, and Betty and I noticed earlier today that they never did put the door on the second door there on the front. They must have decided to put it around the corner there. Yeah. But for the most part, it's pretty similar to the original proposed sketch that they had outlined.
Did they move because that was becoming apartments, or?
I don't think it was becoming apartments quite
No.
yet.
No,
Yeah.
it sat idle a long time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure, Ken. I
I've read I have some newspaper articles
Okay.
in the files about that time period, and
it,
they kind of got pushed out, it sounded like, by the
I-
borough.
I think there were
Or
some
the
some changes being made
Yeah.
in the building, and they kind of
They
needed.
couldn't afford to heat it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, that
yeah.
would be.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some big buildings can be nice, but the bigger the building, the bigger challenges it sometimes
See, that building
presents.
was heated from the power plant. When
Okay,
you stood where the Meyersdale Fair Hall parking lot.
right.
Oh, okay.
Murphy's was heated, the church above the present school apartments down there, apartment. A lot of them buildings
Yeah.
was heated from that power plant. In fact, that was a wooden pipe that the steam come through,
Yeah.
and I have a piece of
Do you?
it. Yes,
Wow.
when we dug out for the fair hall, it was sectioned, and some of it was no good. I got a perfect section.
Yeah.
It's thick
Yeah.
wood.
Now are you talking about the pipe that ran under the
steam.
ground?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am. It was a steam
And
line.
they were wooden pipes?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Ah, yeah. I don't think,
I don't know where to display it. It's big and clumsy and ugly and
yeah,
it's wire wrapped.
yeah.
But it was
I've
real
always heard of them and knew of them, but I never saw one, and I never would have guessed but they were wooden. Huh. So that's Herman. I get the impression he did a good bit of speaking, trying to drum up support for the library and its fund drive to build a new building. And that's a hungry little bookworm. I started noticing him in pictures in our third location down at the old school building, and he's still out front if you look for him. He's kind of cute. And by December 26th, keep in mind they broke ground on September 1st, and by December 26th, the library was moving into its permanent home and opening for service. And that was fast, Perry. How many guys did you have working for you? Do you vaguely remember?
I'd say between 8 and 10.
Okay. It seems, I know nothing about construction, but it seems like you made good progress.
Well, once we got the foundation in, of course,
Yeah.
you're probably not aware of all the problems before that. We tore the bakery down, that big wall you
Yeah.
see collapsed. The guy on the left, there was a loose brick you can see the wall, but not the top. If you look at the building, it's the same way. I went to scaffold and repair that at no charge to him while there was room, and he wouldn't allow it, and then he brought suit against us.
Yeah, I know there were a couple hiccups along
I
the
have to
way.
say, I learned a lot building this library.
Do you have any idea? There's a time capsule, right, behind that
I'm sure it is.
cornerstone?
I'm sure.
You have no idea what's in it.
No.
And I don't know, I've never come across any paperwork in regard to dictating when we're supposed to open it, or I would say if not before, we dig that thing out in
Who's all the people on the pictures at that?
2039. Well, we know the guy in the powder blue suit. He's sitting right in front of you, or almost right in front of you.
Billy
Esther.
Musselder's on the right at the bottom.
Yeah, I was hoping he'd come. He talked like he might try to make it, but yeah, that's George or Bill Mossholder.
George William.
Yeah. Marguerite's in the pictures. Esther Esther Bayshore. Alice Sailors
I was gonna say, I think that's Alice.
in the
Taylor.
white jacket, and I think you can't see her really in this picture, but she's in other pictures from that time. Sharon Clapper, I think, was on the board. That you can just see her in the top picture, the little piece of red dress. Who the woman in the blue dress suit is, I don't know.
Would that be Louise Campbell, maybe?
That's what
Is it?
And is that Bob Filson?
Yeah, that's Bob. That's Bob Filson. Yeah.
Was
So you
Bob
have-
Filson the black suit or where?
In the top photo, I think it looks like kind of actually like a dark chocolate brown
Yeah.
jacket. Yeah.
It was black.
Yeah. And he may even, I bet he was on the board he was on the board a long time, wasn't
Yeah.
he? So he was
Who's
probably,
behind him?
I don't know.
I don't either.
I don't know who that guy is.
On the bottom picture, George William, he worked for me, and I wasn't able to be there.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he gave the talk for the company.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah, he had told me he was part of helping build the library.
Picture of him somewhere.
And there's Perry and Esther. We moved into this building right after Christmas in '84, but being it's Somerset County in the winter, I assume that's why they didn't. They waited until May to dedicate the building. May 11th of '85, they dedicated the building. You can see Marguerite kind of peeking around Perry's shoulder back there, and that's Alice Sailor. Alice Sailor Glime in the doorway, and I don't know if one of the ladies over to the right would be Frances, or I'm not quite sure. I think maybe it would be, maybe the lady in the middle. There are a lot of pictures from the dedication ceremony. I just pulled pulled just a few, but there are a lot that show kind of a bigger street view. They had the community band there. Bill Lloyd, who was the state representative at the time, came and spoke. Paul Fuller was the mayor, he spoke.
Never forget, right there was a train coming through Meyersdale.
Oh, I
And
figured.
he must have blew his whistle from the time he left Paris, so he got the sand patch. And I tried talking through it, and finally we stopped. And then they had me start again, and then we had to stop again because the end of the train got there.
Oh, well, that happens in Meyersdale, right? It's funny though what you remember though. You know, that sticks in your mind. And Marguerite in our new library. And again, it's interesting when you look at the pictures. The old the old cards where they stamped your date and actually wrote in the person's name, and someone must have been checking out a book there.
You notice there was only 4 pencils, so it wasn't a modern day.
And these were taken, right when they moved in. A good portion of the library's full there, but you can see, I found these interesting because we're always talking about how we really could use more space, and we filled it up. We've filled it up in the past 30-some years. And that's Paul Fuller there, the guy in the hat on the top there, and Libby. There's the Hungry Bookworm and a phone that you'd probably see these days in an antique store, because we all remember those phones, but a young person today, it's like, they might figure out it's a phone, I guess. You can kind of see there in the bottom picture with Marguerite and the kids. There was actually a desk in the back corner, and I think at one point the director's office was in what's now the Pennsylvania room. I think when Diane Saylor Daniels was here, I think someone told me at one point that was a director's office. It was a big office. Wasn't it, Terry? Imagine.
Yeah, when did the PA room get back?
The Pennsylvania room, the Pennsylvania room began in what is now our kitchen. And actually, the library's first archivist, a lot of people I don't think realize this because she was only here so long, was Beth Holler. Her married name is now Paige. Beth Holler from Springs. She now lives in Gettysburg, and actually, she's still heavily involved with the Springs Historical Society, and actually did, when I get to the point here where I talk about our grant project, she's the one who did all the work for us on that. But she was the library's first archivist, and she's the one who kind of organized everything initially. From what she's told me, the things that I guess people donated for the PA room were just kind of shoved everywhere in boxes. There was no organization to it. And she started organizing everything. Then she went, I think that was about the time maybe she decided to go to graduate school, or she moved down to the DC area. And then that's when Cynthia came on board. Cynthia, I think technically Cynthia started in 1999. And it was around 2000 when they made the move from that little room back there. And I have come across letters and so forth where Cynthia was reaching out to people. She was trying to get letters of support for the move, and I'm not quite sure who she was sending them to, but she was reaching out to people we helped with genealogy research or whatnot, not to have them write letters, to support the Pennsylvania room's expansion. Yeah. So, and I assume once the Pennsylvania room moved is when the director's, obviously the director's office had to move then too.
Yeah, and it really what was the Pennsylvania room would be a combination of what's now my office and the kitchen, because that was all one room, and the last
Okay.
remodeling we did in
The
2017, they cut the kitchen off of there and moved
Okay.
put in a door down what is my door now.
Yeah. And I do know at some point, and maybe it was while the director's office was in that back room, and maybe even leading into when the Pennsylvania room first moved back there, there are a lot of pictures that look like they held children's activities in that back room. I think before it became full with Pennsylvania room related items, they used it for children's activities too. So, you know, the library, this building itself and the use of its space has really kind of shifted over time too. But then we've been here for going on 40 years, so. But one of the reasons we're presenting these programs, not only to share some information with the community, I had presented a program 3 weeks ago on the Maple Festival, and on June 1st, I'll be presenting one on the tornadoes that hit the area in 1998. This is actually the 25th anniversary of those, and I mean, I think all of us were here at that point in time. And that's one of those things you just kind of don't forget. I mean, even if you weren't directly impacted by them, you know, you're in Somerset County and tornadoes hit, it's pretty big deal. So that's been 25 years, and I'll be doing a program on those on June 1st. But what really led initially to these programs, back in 2021, we applied for a grant in the fall of 2020 through the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. Every year they offer what are called historical archives and records care grants. And we were able to apply for up to $5,000 in funds. It didn't require a match. And we did so. And what we proposed is that we wanted to take a collection of Maple Festival photographs that the library had given us or let us digitize. They were on the old 35mm slides, as were a lot of these library history photos. And we wanted to digitize them, accession them, and offer them for use in the Power Library, which, if you're not familiar with the Power Library, it's a free online library. And if you're at all interested, we have some literature over there. Feel free to take anything you want. It's completely free. There are some resources in the Power Library that require you have a library card. And they have everything from resources for teachers to manuals on how to fix a lawnmower. I mean, Terry's a little more familiar with the Power Library overall than I am, but one of their main components is called PA Photos and Documents, and that's basically a large online historical archive. And there are libraries, historical societies, community colleges from all over the state who have collections inside the Power Library. We received that $5,000 grant. We learned in 2021 that we were awarded the money, and we're actually still working on the project. These presentations are our final stage in wrapping up the project, and by the end of July we need to submit our final grant report. But that money allowed us to hire Beth to do all this work, accession all the records, and place them in the Power Library. And it's a very time-consuming project, these types of things. But there are now about 140 photographs inside the Power Library pertaining to the library. This is just a quick snapshot of our 8 collections. Our library actually has 8 collections in the Power Library, which is pretty good for a library our size. And the one I just want to quickly introduce you to is the one pertaining to the library. Now, the photos that are in here are basically centered around the construction of this building. They don't go back to the cute photos I showed you from the 60s and into the 80s. In my dream world, one day all of these scrapbooks are also digitized and put in the Power Library where anyone could find them, regardless of where they are, and see them. And then that way all these collections would be, or all these photographs and newspaper articles would be available. But all you really have to do and I have some little handouts there, pick one up on your way out, or Terry can pass them around. Pretty simple instructions for getting to the Power Library and getting to our collections specifically. It's just powerlibrary.org, and then the easiest way to find our collections is to go to institution, and this should bring them up. And there you can see some of the other libraries and groups who have collections inside the Power Library. And if we get down to us here in Meyersdale, and again, this is a great, if you enjoy history, you enjoy history of Pennsylvania, there are a lot of interesting things in here. There, if you click on Meyersdale Public Library, you'll see our collections so far. And I'm kind of always thinking ahead of other collections we can add. There, we have tons of material that we can build collections in here. The challenge is the time it takes to do so. And then this is the collection focused on the library. And Lloyd Wilson, I don't know if I bet you remember Lloyd Wilson, Britta. He was actually a former pastor of Zion, my church, Zion Lutheran Church. He's the one who took all these photographs.
Every day, couple times.
You remember him being
very good. Great guy.
Yeah, he liked to take photos. And actually, I had reached out to his daughter in seeing if we could get permission to share these online, and that was no problem. She was happy to allow us to do so. Again, they were 35mm slides, so part of what the grant funded is a scanner that allowed us to digitize those 35mm negatives and create digital images from them. So once you're here in the collection, there are about 7-8 pages worth of photographs like this that Lloyd took as the building was being constructed, and once we moved in. Now, one thing I do want to point out, if you delve into this yourself, keep in mind Lloyd created this for use as a slideshow. So we actually have the old, if you're familiar with 35mm slides, we have the old plastic reel with the 140 slides in, and there was an order to them because they were a slideshow. When we put them in here, they've basically been organized based on alphabetization. And all of that information you see, for each and every photograph, Beth had to add all that information. So as you can see, it's not a quick process. She did that for about 140 library history slides. She did that for upwards of 500 Maple Festival slides, and then she did that for 9 oral histories focusing on the tornadoes. But this, I'm just going to click on this quickly. This is basically, if you decide that you want to take a closer look at this collection in the Power Library, it would be helpful to look at this a little bit and get a feel. This is actually Lloyd and his wife Hazel's outline for that PowerPoint, or the slideshow that they presented, which I think they did that here at the library on May 30th or something. It wasn't during the dedication, it was a few weeks later. But here they have outlined, you can see all of their script essentially for the slideshow. Now if I go back into, if you click on, let's just click on this one. I don't know if Perry's one of the guys in this picture or not, but there obviously you've got the building up, you're starting to lay the bricks, and if you click on the picture itself, you can you can zoom in on it if you want, you can zoom back out, you can see, if you really want to see the picture, you can magnify it to your whole screen. But then if you scroll down further on the page, that's where you can see all of the information related to the photo. And when you see the subject, buildings, building construction, bricklayers, those are actually words that if someone out there is doing a Google search, we all say Google it, let's Google it, and you throw in a word. Those are words that could help someone ultimately land on this particular photograph. So fancy term for it is metadata, but it's basically descriptive text. And if you ever decide to look through any of our collections, really, this one, the Maple Festival, and you come across any photos that there are people in, and you know the people, and we don't have their names, let me know. Write it down, bring it in, send me an email, and what would be great is if you put the alternative title, we always have an accession number there, like for this one, that number 2022.01.049. That number and the people in the photograph would be helpful, because then over time we could add the names in here so people know who they are. So if you're ever just playing around with any of our collections and you see someone you know, just jot it down with that number and get it to me, and over time we can add it. So since our move here, again, we've kind of come a long way. There's one of our library celebrities there. And seriously, this was a huge project. I was not here for it. I've heard a lot about it through Carolyn, and God love her.
I survived it.
You and Cynthia thought you were going to accomplish that. It was for anyone who might not know, it was basically a project where they were planning to document all the cemeteries in the county. And when I say all the cemeteries, we have Union Cemetery. It's not hard to find. I mean, it's a little out of the way, and it's a trek up the hill, but it's obvious once you're there. I mean, Carolyn was in cemeteries where there were one or two stones, or really not even any stones. And there's in our Pennsylvania room, there's Carolyn, there's Cynthia, and Barry Christie, Betty's husband. He was a big part of that project too. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, winning it won a state award?
We got to go to Harrisburg.
Yeah.
It's sort of interesting that one of the hardest ones to find grave sites was right here in Meyersdale. Was one on Sailor Hill out here. Took me 4 trips with 3 different people to try and find that cemetery up on top of that hill.
Well, and I haven't been there yet, but pretty much everyone says, yeah, you're not really going to find it by yourself. You need someone to lead you.
Very difficult to find.
Yeah. But it ended up taking 3 summers.
Yep, it was, she said, I remember, she said, well, we want this done in a year. I'm dumb me, I'm like going, oh, sure, yeah. We'll do that. And then about the second month in, my granddaughter and Alfred Knotts went to the Dog Hill Holly Cemetery, which is at the end of the Lepley Farm, and then 2.5 miles, about a mile and a half down in the valleys, and
Off 160,
off
right?
160 down Skunk Hollow down there, what we call it Skunk Hollow. But we got there about 6 o'clock, and we never climbed out of there till about 9:30 at night, and I'm like going, okay, it took me 1 night to do 1 cemetery. I ain't gonna do them all in 1 year. And Cynthia, we quickly realized this was gonna take more than 1 year, so it wound up taking 3.
But you did it. And how many cemeteries? How many hundred is it?
Well, I actually, I went to almost 800 cemeteries, 800 sites. But I think actually when they all got down to, they said 700 and some sites.
Yeah.
But this included 5 or 6 graves in an Amish an Amish yard, or 5 or 6 graves in the middle of a cornfield. Up in Somerset, up around Somerset, there's a great big cemetery with a great big cross, but you had to wade through an acre and a half, 2 acres of corn to get to the cemetery in the middle of the field. It had corn on all 4 corners, and right there was the cemetery in the middle of the cornfield. They just were all over this county, and very out of the way places.
Yeah.
It was a
And-
fun job.
Yeah.
When,
Well,
when
and-
somebody wasn't threatening to kill me.
I credit you because I know a lot of people who probably wouldn't have made it through a summer. After about a month, some people would have just been like, this isn't for me. So, and that cemetery project is now online. And I know from my 5 years here, it has really driven, since it was put online. You won the award in 2009. I'm not sure technically when Cynthia got it online with Barry's help and how all of that, when it actually launched. But I do know that it has driven a lot of people to the library. They find us through that project, and I know enough from reading through some of Cynthia's papers that she left behind that she was big on making as much information freely available as possible. And I think not only was that her goal in expanding our online offerings, but I think she knew that, hey, if you get the Meyersdale Public Library's name out there online, people are ultimately going to seek us out here in our physical location too. So we had one of our favorite visitors from out of state today. Tara was in. You missed her. Yeah, we get a lot of out of state. Back in 2021, we had, if I'm remembering correctly, there in our Pennsylvania room, we had people sign a guest book from, I think it was 24 different states outside of our own, who came to this little library here in the middle of Meyersdale. So people out there know about us, which is pretty neat. And here we still have kids, here in the library. Now these pictures span from a year or two ago. There's Miss Cindy with the kids down at the playground. This picture I think is maybe from the late 80s. That actually looks like one of the Grimm girls there in the picture in the bottom right corner with one of her kids. And the picture down at the playground there, it looks like they had a little goat. That's when Diane's in that picture. Diane Seller Dan was when she was librarian here. And this is our big festival parade a couple years ago when we marched with our float and got the school kids involved with recreating the Women's Liberty Bell or the Justice Bell, which spent some time. That's a picture of its display in the courthouse in Sharon Ackerman's office. She let us display it the winter of 2020, I think, into 2021. There in the Register of Wills office, and Mike Pietenbrink took those two parade photographs. So we like to get the word out about the library, whether it's online or here within the community and surrounding areas. And there's our leader, Terry. She didn't know I threw this picture in, but we've been blessed over the time. I mean, truly, with good leaders here at the library. And then, we have people who come in and for no pay whatsoever fix up our board. She's pretending I'm not.
I've seen you.
I'm not. We have a lot of people who work for nothing but the personal satisfaction. Rhonda's one of our, she's a good volunteer. She does a little bit of everything out front here, and then we have our friends of the library. Britta's here with our friends of the library, our board members. I've got a great crew of volunteers in the back who are, not only do they help me with these photographs we've acquired from the New Republic after they closed, but a lot of other projects. And truly and honestly, a lot of what we do couldn't happen without the volunteers. And this is one of Terry and I's favorite photos that we've come across in looking through the old scrapbooks. And books do live on. We have a library full of them, and now we have ebooks. I mean, some people prefer ebooks, and that's fine as well. But we have a lot of people who still like to come in and, right, Patty, go home with an actual book. Yes. So that would have been taken in the library's second home, the building down Center Street that no longer exists. But Sing Out for Books, the paper bread, that feeds the hungers in the head. And that photo is dated 1967. And this was actually a little clipping from the Daily American in June of 1977, when the library was doing its annual campaign. And I just pulled out this quote. There are a few public service organizations in the Meyersdale community that have contributed more to the people of that area than the Meyersdale Public Library. And probably most of us remember the old card catalog.
Oh my gosh.
It was interesting. I mean, I'd looked through these scrapbooks before and worked with them on and off, but just actually doing the timeline, it's interesting.
That was my high school graduation date.
16th of June, 1970. That's funny.
Or very close to it. It might have been the 17th. Because
Yeah.
it's been a few
I had no
years.
clue. I just.
But it was
that's
June
nice.
of 77, mid-June.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, things have changed in general in 84 years, but they've certainly changed when it comes to libraries. And this is just a neat, it's a little piece by an unknown author. It's in one of the scrapbooks, and I came across a shortened version, which we'll see here in the final slide. A shortened version, it hangs on the bulletin board in our kitchen too, that was found in Mrs. Cockley's papers. But it reads, I am the library. I am neither walls nor shelves, nor even the books that stand in rows, nor print that smiles from open pages. Value me not for these, for they are but the trappings, the house in which I live and the clothes I wear. But come to me to know me for what I am, the wisdom of the world, captured and arranged for you, brave deeds performed before your very eyes, the music of tuneful words, hours of laughter, and moments close to tears, the glitter of Arctic ice and the blaze of desert sun, the spirit of discovery and the thrill of invention. I am an open door. And I just think that's a good way to sum up the library, and any library really. I mean, public libraries are places where it doesn't matter who you are, you're welcome and you can come, and that's the way it should be. This is the little shortened version that was supposedly found in Marguerite's papers. She uses the word universe instead of world. I'm the wisdom of the universe, and you is underlined, which I think obviously was intentional. And I kind of summed up with this slide because by the time I spent a few days on this presentation, I really thought, I kind of walked away from it thinking, this library is a true representation over almost 84 years, and if you factor into the Women's Club idea in 1938, over 84 years of community. I mean, the countless people over time who have in one way or another contributed to not only the forming of our library in the late 1930s, but its move from building to building as it got bigger and bigger and on into today. And now we do things that Marguerite and Francis Collins and Francis Imler could have, what would they have thought of? The internet, and here's a collection online, and you have a I don't know, and we stand here in 2023, and who knows? I hope, personally, I sure hope the library continues to exist. I hope it continues to exist in one way or another, but I really hope it continues to exist, libraries continue to exist in a physical form. The online is wonderful, and I think there are a lot of benefits to it, getting our name out there and making resources available to people who otherwise, there are people who leave Meyersdale, but they still like to come back, and we share these photographs and they enjoy them. But there is something about coming into the library and being here physically and that kind of community building too. So it's a true story of community through over 8 decades, and a lot of people who gave their time. So I thank you for coming, and does anyone have any questions or any thoughts or memories they'd like to share. I mean, we
Or
all have
is-
memories of the.
Or is anybody waiting for me to turn off the recorder?
But you can go ahead and get some literature. Some of these scrapbooks are nice. You're welcome to. They're all nice, and they kind of run the gamut from some of those earliest newspaper articles up until when this building was constructed. But I guess then that's it. And thank you all for coming.